Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Healing Half. My name is Miki. I'm a musician, author, and host of tonight's show, The Healing Half. 30 minutes of a quick check-in, of quick growth, and of quick learning. We have such a powerful episode tonight. I am so excited. So if you know our guest, make sure you say hi to her in the comments, whether you are watching live or as a replay. Both her and I will go back through the comments of the whole show and just see if there's any questions we can answer and see who's on. So we love to see everybody here. So thank you all so much for being here today. I have a quick announcement before we dive into the show. I have some exciting news. On this Friday, I am dropping my first ever solo produced, solo written, sung from A to Z, literally no hired help this whole time. I challenged myself to produce a song, and I took a 6-month class. It took forever. Lots of humbling happened, but I am just so excited to share with you guys my upcoming single, Light a Candle for Me. So there's two things that I have to ask of you guys, because I want to share it with you. I want to share it with the world, so that way you have it in your back pocket in case you need to send it to somebody or use it for yourself. So Light a Candle for Me is a song that I hope you will use on days that are hard, on days that you need to reconnect with the memory of your lost loved one. So the two asks that I have is, if you don't mind, in the comment section, I believe I put this link called the pre-save link. Without worrying too much about what that means, if you have a Spotify account and after the show, you click on that link, it'll allow you to pre-save it. And then that way on Friday, it's just going to show up right away in your Friday release radar. If that means, if that's like alien language to you, never mind. The second ask that I have of you is going to be applicable to everyone. If you are not on my email list yet, please do so. Not only will I send you the replay of tonight's show with the kind of quick highlights for you, some other goodies along the way, but on Friday, this specific Friday, bright and early in the morning, the first people I'm going to tell my song and put all the links, the lyric videos, all of that will be to my email list, my dedicated fans who I am, and I'm not kidding, extremely grateful for. So I want to make sure you're on that list. So then that way you're going to get one bright and early Friday morning. You're going to get all of the links available. So then you can watch it on your preferred platform, because I know not everybody's on Spotify. I'll also make sure you have a Facebook link so you can share it if you feel called. I would greatly appreciate that. But the biggest thing is I wanted to give you guys a gift. In addition to the song, I am creating a PDF that will be sent out Friday morning, as well as for anybody who signs up for my email list after Friday. That is going to have the lyrics, a candle ceremony poem that you can read and go through on days that are hard, whether it's by yourself or with other people, like my family oftentimes does, and my in-laws. We do candle lighting ceremonies for Brendan, who's no longer with us, every holiday, and they're so special. But then the last part of that PDF is it's going to be a little reflection, similar, but not exactly as long as my book, My Heart Still Remembers. And I've got a copy right here. So if you have done this before and you're like, oh, I really liked the style, I liked how, it's fill in the blank and it's kind of guides me through from beginning to end. Not only don't forget to get your own copy, you can get so on my website if you'd like, but also I think this PDF, you're really going to like it. I've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into thinking, what would make this special for people? And again, this is with the whole theme of the show. It's not only about, is it special for you? My goal is to give you a tool belt, so that way when you have friends and family in your life that are going through a hard time, immediately you've got a resource where you're like, hey, there's this song and this workbook that I think you're really, really going to like. Check it out. It's on Miki Spears' website. So that's my goal. I'm so excited. If you believe music heals, give me an amen in the comment section. I believe it sure does. And I am just, whatever God has for this song, I'm just praying that it reaches the people it needs to reach. So if you believe in prayer, I would just greatly appreciate your prayer this week. Going into my first ever solo release, which is really exciting. And best part is there's a lot more where that came from. That said, let's get to our amazing guest, Lynn, who is joining us tonight. She is an active member of the Modern Widows Club, which I'll let her tell all about that here in a second. But before I bring Lynn on, I just wanted to reintroduce the show for those of you who might not be super familiar what we do here at the Healing Half. So when I was 13, my mom passed away from cancer. I'm an Eden Prairie, Minnesota resident, so I know a lot of you guys are from Minnesota too. And I spent the better part of 10 years pretending I was fine and trying to convince myself that I was a normal teenager with a normal life and that I could handle it on my own. Well, as I'm sure you guys have figured out, the only way to get through grief is to go through grief. And my world was crumbling all around me emotionally, spiritually, relationally. I was a mess. And I realized I have this unprocessed grief that I need to work through. So I went to counselors, still a huge believer in counselors, did lots of reading, lots of books. And I realized the reason why 13-year-old me wanted to believe that I could do it myself was that wasn't an original idea, right? That came from somewhere, and that's cultural. And I realized if this is a cultural problem that we all think we have to be strong and we're fine and we don't have to worry about it, we have to address this. Our mental health is literally at stake here. And that's why I created the show. Not only will we get to hear from guests about how to address our own wounds, so if you can relate to Lynn and her story tonight, man, I pray that it resonates with you and heals you and gives you some direction on where to go next, but also gives us perspective on stories we don't understand so that as a community, we can be smarter and more helpful. My prayer is that most of you don't know what it's like to be in Lynn's shoes, right? I hope most of you are not widows or widowers, but I know some of you are. And for those of you who are, extreme welcome to you. I'd love to hear your story. If you just mention in the comments, it'd be great to get to know you a little bit better. But for the rest of us, I want to learn how can we support widows better? And tonight, in particular, we are going to be going over how do we support widows as they get remarried, which is a big topic. So Lynn, thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Mickey. I'm so excited for your song on Friday too. And for as young as I am, one would think that I would know what Spotify was and be a pro, but I'm going to have to ask a kid. I bet
That's
my
okay.
18-year-old knows everything, so he'll hook me up, I'm sure.
That's a good announcement. Yeah, if you don't know what Spotify is, ask a millennial in your life or a
For
Gen
sure.
Z, and they'll help you out. Or just get on my email list. Just kidding. But Lynn, thank you so much for being here and for being willing to share your story. I guess let's just dive in. Do you mind
Absolutely.
just starting from the top?
Well, the story is long and lengthy, and we don't have that much time for all of it. So I'll try and give everybody, the cheap version of it. But they can all reach out if they want to talk more about this topic because it's definitely one that is obviously very close to me because I've walked that path. But really, it's a unique story and maybe even more unique than others. I met my first soulmate, as you kind of mentioned in your kind of teeing up for tonight. My first husband, Mike, when we were in college, I was a freshman and he was a junior. We were married shortly after college when I graduated and lived an amazing life. We were very lucky and very blessed for several years. We have three wonderful children together. And unfortunately, shortly after our third child was born, our youngest, our daughter, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he had had cancer when he was in before college. He had melanoma and skin cancer. So, but back then, that's a long time ago. Gosh, we would have been married 20 years this last November. So 25, give or take, years ago. The treatment plans were so much different, right? So it never really even crossed our mind that it might rear back up again. Honestly, it was not like your traditional ball, I wasn't thinking in that way. But he was diagnosed with a brain tumor and it had reared up. He lived 27 months with cancer, fought valiantly, and honestly, for most of that time, you might not have even known he had cancer, except for the bald head. But lots of guys were going bald by the time they hit their mid 30s anyway, so they probably could have gone either way. Um, and he's not here, so I can kind of give him a hard time, I guess, right? Because he poor guy can't defend
Right.
himself. So, but he was, he fought valiantly, and but unfortunately passed away in the beginning of September of 2011. And at the time, then I had three small kids. Brock was 7, Braden was 5, and Brooklyn was 3. So they were just tiny little babies. So we were going to figure out how to be a family of 4 instead of family of 5. And that changed pretty quickly again. So
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing. As I look at that photo, thank you again for sending me. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful and so haunting at the same time. And I know part of the reason why I'm so excited for you to share your story is I was one of 3 kids whose parent died. So it's kind of fun. That's a sick way of looking at it. It's a blessing to
interesting.
be able to, it's interesting, right? To be able to hear as a kid, the adult's perspective, because I've got the kid's perspective.
Mhm.
Not that every kid's the same or any adult's
Right.
the
And
same.
every age is so different, right?
It's just so different. So I just see that beautiful family, and then my heart hurts because I think
So,
of course, you, but I also think of me, and I think of all the kids, who've lost
mhm.
parents, and I hate it so much.
And
But that's not why we're here today. We will talk about that another time.
we can
So,
do
Lynn,
this all over again and have that kind of conversation if you want.
right? I would love to have you on the show anytime to talk about that. So yes, let's do it. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about remarriage. So, how does the story continue?
So, interestingly enough, my late husband, Mike, farmed on the side with his dad. His dad passed away about a year and a half before Mike did. So Mike had been farming on the side, and we owned a few pieces of farm equipment. Please don't ask me what they were because I have no idea. I grew up literally in the Twin Cities, right? In a suburb. I wouldn't have been caught dead prior to meeting him ever on a farm. Probably didn't know what anything was or did. But we had a really great good friend that thankfully farms a very large farm in Western Minnesota, and happily took that responsibility from me and helped me through the process of clearing that out. And for those of you that are widowed or widowers, that process can be very daunting for the things that you know about, let alone the things that you have zero clue about. But our good friend then one day calls me up to give me 2 pieces of news. One, he says to me, "Well, Lynn, I'm so glad I sold your tractor." I'm like, "Great, thanks for that info." And then he says to me, "Oh, well, Sally and I were talking," and I'm thinking, that's not good news because those two we've been friends with for years. They got married shortly after Mike and I did, and they just knew us well, right? They're one of your friends where you're just like, I feel trouble brewing, like something's going to come out of there that I'm not sure I'm ready for. But he said, "Hey, I've got this friend that I went to high school with. I know you're probably not ready to date, but I think that you two would really hit it off. I think it would be great for you to have somebody." He lives in the small town just 5 miles away from where I lived in the suburbs. You know, uh, I think you two should hit it off. And I laughed immediately, like, really? I mean, Mike hadn't even been gone 3 months yet at this point, and I said, all right, here's the deal. I'll give you this one chance. You call him and tell him all about me because he had walked obviously the path of Mike's illness and Mike's passing with us and been a part of that journey. And I just said, "You tell him about my journey enough. You tell him I'm a widow with 3 little kids. And if he still wants to call me, then give him my number." Right? I'm thinking he's never going to call, right? There's no way he's going to go, that sounds like a hot mess. I want no part of that. Um, but he did call, and we just connected, and we went on our first date. And here's another thing where it's not necessarily funny, but it's one of those coincidences that you just know that sometimes things were meant to be the way they were. Um, so back when Mike and I got engaged, I wanted to have a Christmas wedding. And so we had picked December 2nd as our wedding date. And unfortunately, the church I grew up in didn't do weddings after Thanksgiving. So we had to bump up our wedding. It ended up being fabulous and it was wonderful. And I'm so glad we moved it into November. It worked out the way it was supposed to then. But as I'm having this conversation with my now dating this guy I'm going to go on a date with, right? Who's now my second husband. Um, he says, well, how about, Friday? Does Friday work? I'm like, well, let me see if I can get a babysitter, right? Because remember, hi, not just a single mom where I'm divorced. I actually don't have a partner to even pawn my children off on, maybe occasionally. I am an only parent. And I didn't think about the day, but as the date, the next day I rolled around, got the babysitter lined up, looked at the calendar and went, oh my gosh, Friday is December 2nd. And it just felt like Mike was there. Like he was saying, this is right. Like this is supposed to be. Because back when we couldn't get married on December, but something awesome is just going to take its place someday. So that's why we can't have December 2nd because something else is going to happen. And then we have children and I think, oh, well, we're going to have a kid that day. Or then when he got sick, I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to die that day. Like that's terrible, right? Didn't. But, it's like, oh, well, things happen. I think sometimes things work out the exact way they're supposed to, and you don't always know it, 10 years, 11 years before that, I wouldn't have had a clue. Right.
Right.
So
I would go on to say most of the time, we never know what's going to happen until like it's right in front of us, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, there it is." Oops! And give me 1 second, Lynn. Can you hear me? Okay? Am I frozen for everybody?
when great. Oh, you were
Oh,
frozen.
Lynn, can you
I
hear
was
me?
like, yeah,
Yeah,
I can hear
sorry.
you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much for rolling with the punches. Can I get an amen in the comments section if you've ever had tech issues at home? I feel like every single day. So thank you all so much for rolling with it. But I'm so sorry, Lynn. It froze a little bit on me.
No, you're
Back
fine.
up 2 steps. So December 2nd was a big day. I was just going to add on. I feel like most of the time we never know those coincidences until it hits you in the face. And you're like, oh, now it
Hmm.
all makes sense. So you kind of already let us in on the how the story ends. How did that go?
Honestly, Jeff and I have just hit it off. I believe that it was Mike and God knowing that I wasn't going to want to do the whole dating thing. I would have probably given up after the first bad date, so it's a good thing it was a good one because I would have been like, "Oh no, I'm done. I don't need to do this. Like I can be single and I can rock this just fine." So I think that they just knew that this was what was needed and it was how it was going to have to be if it was going to work out, right? So yeah, and Jeff and I have been together ever since. So we will be married for 8 years this June, and we'll have been together for 10 in December. And we'll have celebrated Mike's
Congratulations.
10th anniversary in September, and then we'll celebrate being together for 10 years in December. So it's a
Oh,
unique
that's
and weird sometimes story, and some people kind of raised eyebrows. I'm sure there maybe even was people watching that as soon as they heard less than 3 months, they were like, "Ooh," but it was
whoa.
part of my story. It's part of who I am.
Right. Right. And I look at that beautiful family photo of you guys now. So this is
Mhm.
current. This is a beautiful
Yes,
blended family. How awesome.
yes,
So I am just so happy for you. So happy early 10-year anniversary.
thank you.
Absolutely. So I guess, and you kind of hinted at it. The big reason why, of course, I'm so happy for you, and I love. We could just stop there and leave it at that.
Good
But
story.
I really think, yeah, it is a good story. It's a beautiful God laced story, and I love that so much. I think what we need to dive into now is the pushback and the misconceptions, because again, like you said, like there's probably people who hear that and immediately are like, whoa, too
Hmm.
fast. I wouldn't, and then they start to just kind of apply lots of that stuff. So I guess I'll just kind of pass the mic over to you, and I'll just kind of let you tell your experience on what people said to you, and maybe what you said back that you think it'd be good for those of us who can't relate to understand.
Sure. So a lot of times people don't say too much depending on who they are, right? And your closeness to them, right? How close your friends are. They may or may not say too much to your face, but you definitely, I think there is a threshold of people thinking that You should be going through the grieving process and be widowed or be a widower for a year, 2 years, maybe more. I mean, I think there's lots of people that just would never be comfortable with a
Mhm.
friend or family member repartnering, because it's hard and you think that they're replacing that person. And in reality, and in my perspective, I didn't replace Mike with Jeff. It's like having children. For anyone that has children, your first one you love with all your heart, and then you have another one, and you don't stop loving the first one just a little bit to make more love for them. No, you love them both equally, and well, most of the time, depending on the day, right? Don't tell my kids that. They're off in their rooms. But, they're you love them equally and you love them exponentially, right? There's no end of it. It is not a matter of there is a level like I can only love you this much because I have to love your sibling too, right? There is just an abundance of it. And that's how I view my relationships with my spouses. Um, I'm married and will always have a relationship with Mike because he will always be my husband, right? We didn't choose to not be married. Our relationship ended because he died. I love Jeff and I will always love Jeff for our relationship that we have. I I wrote a post on my Facebook page on my 20th, what would have been our 20th wedding anniversary, about how really it's this matter of I can love the man I'm with and love the life that I live because I honor the memories that I have and I carry them with me. And I think it's really important because most women, at least that I've met, and of course, I'm sure men say the same thing, but I've spent a lot of time with widows, not, with women. Um, we would call ourselves remarried widows. I'm still a widow. I'm still always going
Mhm.
to be Mike's widow, but I am Jeff's wife. And so it's that balance of having both, right? And loving, and there's no end to that amount of love, right? But it's a respect and it's a matter of balance between it. I think there's a lot of people that can judge that emotion, and I think when you can explain it to someone, especially if they have children and you explain it that way, they can start to see the picture. And even
Mhm.
those that don't, right, can kind of grasp that concept because they were once a child and maybe have a sibling and they know their parents didn't love one more than the other. So it's grasping that concept and just understanding. Um, you know, Really, there was a lot of people that just couldn't believe I was already dating again, and I just kind of came
Mhm.
back with a simple answer of, well, when you've buried your husband at 33, then you can tell me what to do. And maybe that wasn't always the kindest answer by far. But I'm a little bit snarky and a little bit crass, and I got worse in widowhood just because I was kind of like, whatever. Like, this is my life. And like, seriously, I cared for an ailing husband. I did things that 80-year-old wives do, not 33-year-old wives do, right? Um, we didn't really go on romantic vacations because guess what? We were going to the Mayo Clinic. Like, that was our romantic vacation. Ooh, you have a PET scan this week. Let's go, right? Um, so, those kinds of things that I didn't tolerate it very well. And I probably lost a few friends in the process. And I probably didn't gain a few in the process as well. But at the same time, it was kind of like, this is the mess of a life that I got gifted. And I got to
Mm.
figure out how to make it beautiful again. And making it beautiful was really, really important to me because Mike was he was an amazing person. And he wouldn't have wasted a day. Not that he wouldn't have, like, he maybe would have moved on or if the roles were reversed, but he would just lived passionately for every day. And so I felt like that was super important. And in living the life that came after loss had to be a passionate, love-filled life. And it didn't matter whether it was a love-filled life with another person, but I had to teach my kids how to have this amazing love-filled life. Because
Mhm.
without that, how are they going to be productive, amazing humans um, when they lost their dad at the age of 3, 5? and 7, right? They
Right.
were like,
Right.
I had to teach them how to be that way. And so it was really important to me to just kind of say, this is the mess that is my fabulous, beautiful life. And I look back now and after all these years and I think, man, I have the best life ever. And that is something that I know might be really hard for a lot of newly widowed
Mhm.
people, but I was in that place. I remember thinking that this sucks. Okay, maybe even worse words, right? In my head. Like this is the worst thing ever. But now I'm grateful for this beautiful life that I have. And I can't look at it and say, I wish I would or I wish I had. Instead,
Mhm.
I just get to look at it and go, I got these amazing years with Mike, and he made me partially who I was. His illness and death changed my life a little bit more. And then I get to have this amazing man that walks beside me now, and he's made me even more who I am. So, you know, it's an interesting journey for anyone walking the path, for sure.
Oh, well, I so appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, and your spunk as you kind of tell these stuff. That's so good, and I love the children metaphor. I think that's amazing, and I think that that definitely helps. Like, oh, like that does put it into perspective. I don't have kids, but I've got 3 pets, and I love them all so much. And if you had me to pick one, I'd be like, well, I like them all. Why do I
Right?
have to pick? And so I just am so grateful for you sharing that. And I kind of have a couple follow-up questions if that's
Yeah.
okay. You know, you talked about people judging you that like, well, when you're 33 and widowed, like you let me know, like, you know what I mean? But it kind of does raise the question of from other widows who I know I've heard just because I'm in this grief world and I have the pleasure of meeting so many people. I've heard widows like literally say, like, well, he was the love of my life. I will never get remarried. I along the lines of like I couldn't do that to him because he was my soulmate. And I don't want to diminish their story because if that's what they're feeling,
Mhm.
awesome and like great, like good for you.
Right.
But you know, the difference being when someone's divorced or broken up, we're happy when they find somebody else
Mhm.
because it's like that was a bad relationship, but you're in a good one now, and we're happy for you. But it
Right.
almost feels like when somebody dies, and I've experienced this, of course, witnessing my dad get back out in the dating world. It feels like whether it's widows or not widows, people, it's almost like, whoa, there can just be people who aren't as
Mhm.
happy. So
Yeah.
whether it's a really roundabout way of asking, addressing other widows, how have you kind of had to combat that? Because I'm sure there's some judgment from people who are way closer to your story
Mm. For
than
sure.
someone like me. Yeah.
I think one thing that you learn many times early in widowhood that I've encountered with a lot of the women that I connect with, is that everybody's story is so different, even if our journeys are really similar. Even if you lost your husband to
Mm,
cancer, even if you're a mom and you've got younger kids, even if even if you look at our stories and they match up really close, I'm still a different person than you are. Right. And I think that when I've encountered, because it's not that it happens terribly often, but it does happen where people are like, "Oh, I can't believe you got remarried so quickly," or "I can't believe you started dating
mm,
so soon," right? And I usually just combat that with, you have to decide what works best for you. Um, Kind of turn it around, right? Because it's usually they're maybe feeling like they want to, or they're interested in it a little bit, but they've got that in the back of their mind running like, I shouldn't, it's too soon. Told me he didn't want me to get remarried or date again, because that's been told. I was really lucky. Mike tried to broach the subject with me near the end of like, I want you to be happy, and I was like shutting him down, right? Like, we're not talking about this. Like, this is not a conversation we're having. But that replayed in my mind, that brief little snippet, right? But I think sometimes when they're thinking that, I mean, they may not be ready, and they may be thinking, "Oh, I could never do that again." But I think also think never say never, because I would have probably said, if you would have asked me before or right after Mike died if I was going to date or marry again, I would have probably laughed and been like, "Yeah, no, ain't got no time for that." I mean, have you met my children? They're like tiny little monsters. Like, they're amazing, but they're monsters. No one's got time to work, grieve, and raise children and help them with their grieving. Um, But, everybody's different. And I think that that's the one thing that, besides obviously just being understanding of anyone's story, is really just to appreciate your journey is different than someone else's.
Mm,
Whether you choose one way or not, your journey is different. And my story is not your story. And just because I've met lots of widows that don't get remarried or date again and are very, very happy, I don't judge them for being like, oh, I can't believe they're still single. Like, I would never
yeah,
say that to them, right? So I think that that's some of it, right? Is that turning it up
yeah,
on their ear and saying, but your story is different than mine, and that's okay, and being accepting, because then they're likely to probably be more accepting of my story. Or, if someone's having this conversation with a friend. Um,
yeah.
but, you know,
Oh,
it's
I
it's
love
a
that.
unique journey. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's no timeline to any of
There's
this at
no
all,
timeline, there's no one path.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So thank you so much for sharing. I've got like a trillion other questions that I want to ask you. So we're just gonna have you back on the show
Yeah,
another time. But do you mind before we go? Because obviously, and the phrase is like drilled into my head now, and I love that you shared it with me. I'm a widow and I'm a wife. Like you are
mhm.
both of those things. And maybe another time we'll talk about how to grieve while you're in a relationship. Um, I think that's another 30-minute
Messy.
topic.
That's a really long conversation.
It's a really long conversation. But there's a lot of widows on this call who are probably like, wow, I want to know her because she sounds amazing. So, do you mind telling us a little bit about what you do? And I'll make sure I repost Modern Widows Club link in the comment section.
Sure. So I am, as my side gig, I'm a program director for Modern Widows Club. So we are a widows nonprofit organization that helps provide hope, healing, growth, and opportunities to lead for widows. I actually was really lucky, and I got to, well, quote unquote, meet Carolyn Moore online within a very short period of time of losing Mike, and it really did change the trajectory of my grief and my
Mm,
widowhood, because it did give me hope. I hadn't found anything in our community that was like that, right? And it doesn't matter how old you are, but it's more, I always look at it as we're an organization about people that are forward thinking, right? And women that are looking forward to the next step and wanting to kind of stay leaned into life. Um,
mm,
Definitely not always young widows, by any means, but definitely more young at heart or young minded. Like they still think I have a lot of life to give and live.
mm,
And so had been looking for that connection and was lucky to meet Carolyn early in that, because the first grief group I went to, I sat next to this very sweet older woman, but she patted me on the leg and said, "Oh, sweetie, you can get remarried." And I thought, well, yeah, and no. So that, that adds to the layer of fun, right? Because not only did I end up actually dating and remarrying pretty quickly, but early on, I mean, that was the last thing that was from my mind. I was looking for
mm,
grief support or resources and ideas of way to continue to move myself forward. So we provide a lot of different resources. So I'd encourage you to check that out. But of course, and then I have my email on there. If anybody wants to talk personally or wants to connect privately, you can feel free to find me on LinkedIn or on Facebook or email me from Modern Widows Club.
Perfect. Oh, well, Lynn, thank you so much. Like, seriously, you are awesome. I'm
This
absolutely
is
going to
super
have
fun.
you back on the show if you're okay with that.
I'll come back
um,
anytime you want.
Yay. Oh, well, thank you so much for your story. I see all the comments. So many people love you and love your story. So thank you so much for being here. It's so great to have you.
I appreciate you letting me join. This was lots of fun.
Yeah,
Thank you
no
very
worries.
much.
Yeah, bye. Oh my goodness, you guys. What? I learned so much, and I know I've got like 50 other questions to ask. So, as she mentioned, I will make sure her email is in my follow-up email. So make sure you head to mickeyspirit.com and get on that email list if you haven't yet. Not only so that way you can get her email, Modern Widows Club link again, the replay of the show, the highlights of the show, but then also, so then on Friday, you're gonna get another email from me. You're gonna get two from me this week. Promise, I don't spam anything any more than that. You're gonna get two emails this week packed full of goodies. So I'm gonna put that in the comment section one more time. Thank you all so much for being here. If this is your first time, I would love to have you back. I know I see some names, I've seen it all the time, and I am so grateful for every single one of you. If you are interested, and this is totally just an if, I'm actually going to be performing tonight on another Facebook Live show. So I just wanted to let you know that if you're around in like half an hour and you're like, yeah, I want to hear her perform, light a candle and see me, you're more than welcome to join. It'd be great to have you. That link is in the comments section. So feel free to join me tonight if you want. If not, no worries. I'll make sure that I send you everything you need to know about light a candle on Friday. Thank you guys so much for being here. Again, if you want to get in touch with Lynn, I see a couple comments asking that. I'll make sure her email is in the summary email. So head to mikispear.com. Make sure you're on that email list. Thanks so much, you guys. Always such a pleasure. And Lynn, thank you again for sharing your brave story.